So why is it that some people get addicted, but others don't? Why is it that you could have been doing the same thing as your friends in high school, but you're the one who developed an alcohol addiction? I'm Dr. K. I'm a board-certified addiction medicine physician, and I practice in Cary, North Carolina. And today I'm going to share with you some reasons why some people get addicted and other people don't. And I hope that if you are struggling with a substance use disorder and you're watching this video, the information that I'm about to share with you will help reduce some of the stigma you may feel and will help you seek treatment or continue to engage in treatment. Because help is out there, and really, this didn't happen because you're a bad person. So, the first risk factor that I'll talk about is actually the one that has the biggest impact, and that's genetics. So genetics account for about 50% of your risk of developing an addiction. This is why it's vitally important to understand your family history. And in some families, addiction or substance use just isn't really talked about. Somebody may even come from a family where their parents didn't drink or use substances at all, and they may think that they're actually not at risk for addiction. But maybe the reason why their parents never drank or used substances was because their parents struggled with addiction and they saw the damage that it caused. This is why it's also really important to have frank conversations with your kids about family history and risk of addiction. Because the fact is, not everybody grows up with the same risk. Like you, your kid could be doing behaviors that all of his friends are doing, but he may be at increased risk for really developing a problem. The next factor that we're going to discuss is age at first use. So it actually matters if you started drinking at age 14 versus if you started drinking at age 20. If somebody has their first cigarette at age 11 or 12, it's going to be much harder for them to quit when they're an adult. Now, the reason for this is that during adolescence, the brain is growing very quickly. It's kind of like it's responding to the body's own miracle grow. And now, as that brain is developing so quickly, the impact of any drug or substance is going to be amplified. So their brains are much more likely to adapt to that substance and develop some of the brain changes that we see with addiction than if they had waited until their late 20s to try the same substance. The next factor is the delivery of the substance. And by that, what I mean is how you take it. So the faster the substance gets to the brain and starts creating psychoactive effects, the more addictive it is. Now, when you smoke something or you inject it, it gets into your system really quickly and it gets to your brain really quickly. And this is why when somebody is at the point where they're actually injecting drugs, it is going to be much more difficult for them to overcome their addiction than if they were still snorting it like they did in the beginning. Now, I want to be clear, any drug use is unsafe and toxic to the brain, but the way that you take a substance does make a difference on your ability to quit. The next thing we'll discuss is actually the potency of the substance. So the more potent a substance is, the more powerful the person's response to it is, and the more likely they will become addicted to it. A really good example of this is the THC content in cannabis. So I see a lot of clients who are using THC containing products, whether they're smoking marijuana or they're eating pot brownies. The rates of use of cannabis have really skyrocketed over the past 10 years. Now, this is a problem for a couple reasons, but the biggest problem that I see is that people don't understand that the potency of marijuana today is much different than the potency of marijuana 20, 30, or 40 years ago. It's really as if it's an entirely different drug. Oftentimes, I'll talk with parents who are really relaxed about their teenager smoking pot because, hey, It's what they did when they were teenagers too, and they turned out all right. So I help them to understand that actually the THC content in the marijuana that their kids are smoking can be 2 times, 5 times, even 10 times the amount that it was when they were their kids' age. This potency has actually resulted in higher rates of cannabis use disorder or cannabis addiction. In fact, the rates doubled between 2003 and 2013. And smoking marijuana, whether that's smoking a joint or vaping it, is a really efficient and fast way to get that THC to the brain, making it even more addictive. The next risk factor that we're going to talk about is childhood trauma. So childhood trauma is a really significant factor in addiction, and for some of the same reasons that age at first use is important. During your childhood, the brain goes through periods where it has these growth spurts, and during those growth spurts, any substance that is introduced or things that happen to the child can have kind of an outsized effect. So early childhood trauma can be particularly devastating because this is the period of time where your brain is really developing some of those circuits that become so important later in life. Now, early childhood trauma can actually cause underdevelopment of the child's reward system and, in a way, overdevelopment of their fear system. Now, what this results in is somebody who has high levels of discomfort, and really their ability to tolerate distress is very low. And their response to substances of abuse and their response to psychoactive substances may really dwarf their response to any kind of natural rewards. This really parallels what we see in the development of addiction in adults. But in cases of early childhood trauma, it's really as if the brain gets a head start on those changes and makes somebody exceptionally vulnerable to addiction. Now, if you want to learn more specifically about the effects of childhood trauma and addiction, I'll put a link to another video of mine below. So I hope this video has helped you to better understand why some people get addicted to substances and some people don't. And I hope it helps to really dispel this myth that addiction is just about bad people making bad choices. Because it's not. A lot of us make bad choices. A lot of kids smoke pot in high school or drink beer, but not all of them develop an addiction. Only a minority of them. So this is again why it's so important to talk to your kids about your family history, especially since in teenagers, their brain isn't fully developed anyway, and they're much more likely to make impulsive choices. Also, I hope that this video has helped to reduce some of the shame that you may be carrying around with you. This is not something that you asked for. Nobody in kindergarten goes to school and says, "Oh, when I grow up, I want to be addicted to painkillers, and I want to lose custody of my children and lose my job." It just doesn't happen. Nobody wants to have an addiction. But unfortunately, some people do develop them. It's really important to understand that the shame that people carry around with them can sometimes be just as destructive as their addiction. So if you need help, I want you to know that help is out there. And if you think this video might be helpful for someone else, please share it. If you want to see more videos on topics related to addiction and mental health, subscribe to my channel. And until then, I'm Dr. K, and be well.